Abandoned by cruel in-laws during a brutal winter, a widowed settler and her 2 children were left with nothing. Just when hope seemed lost, a poor cowboy stepped in with kindness. A story of humanity, reunion, and reborn family. If this story touches your heart, please like, share, comment your thanks, and subscribe. Don't miss the heartwarming ending.
In the Untamed Wyoming Territory, Sarah Mitchell faces the fight of her life. Abandoned by her wealthy Boston in-laws after her husband's death, she struggles to protect her 2 young children in a broken-down frontier cabin. With winter approaching and supplies running low, Sarah's situation grows desperate. Then Luke McCall, a rugged cowboy with his own painful past, discovers the struggling family. What starts as a simple act of frontier kindness soon becomes something more as Luke helps them rebuild their lives. But Sarah's in-laws aren't finished with her yet. They want the children back in Boston, where they believe they belong. As Luke stands with Sarah against mounting threats, an unexpected love begins to grow. But can their newfound happiness survive when the Mitchells return with their darkest secrets? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Mitchell's trembling fingers traced the columns of her food ledger by lamplight. The numbers didn't lie, no matter how many times she recounted them. 3 weeks of flour, if they stretched it thin. Maybe 2 weeks of dried beans. The salt. Pork wouldn't last more than 10 days, even with careful rationing. "Mama!" Emma's voice drifted from the corner where both children huddled near the dying fire. "Could we add another log?" Sarah glanced at the pitiful woodpile visible through the cabin's single window. "Not yet, darling. We need to save it for when it gets truly cold." She forced a smile, though her heart ached at the sight of her 8-year-old daughter wrapped in every blanket they owned, still shivering. 6-year-old James slept fitfully against his sister's shoulder, his cheeks flushed with more than just the fire's fading warmth. Sarah had been rationing the willow bark tea, but his cough worried her more with each passing day. The ledger's final page held more than just inventory. In Thomas's careful hand, he'd written their plans for the winter. Crops to be harvested, meat to be smoked, repairs to be made. But Thomas hadn't lived to see any of it through. The frontier fever had taken him in 3 days, leaving Sarah alone with 2 small children and his family's contempt. "We believed Thomas's judgment was compromised when he married you," her father-in-law had sneered, standing in this very cabin 2 months ago. "This frontier foolishness proves we were right. The children will return to Boston with us, where they belong." Sarah's refusal had cost them everything. The Mitchells had withdrawn all support, taking even the horses Thomas had brought from their stock. They'd left her with nothing but a clear message: surrender the children, or watch them suffer. A wolf's howl pierced the gathering dusk, closer than yesterday. Emma pulled James tighter against her side, and Sarah saw her daughters, lips moving in silent prayer. The gesture was so like Thomas it made her throat tight. He'd taught Emma to pray through her fears, to trust in God's providence. But after 2 months of dwindling supplies and growing isolation, Sarah's own faith wavered. She closed the ledger and moved to the children, gathering them both into her arms. Emma's forehead felt warm, too warm. "Tell us about Boston, Mama," James mumbled sleepily. "About the big houses and the parties." "Those aren't our stories anymore," Sarah whispered, rocking them gently. "Our stories are here now, but for how much longer? The winter would be brutal at best, deadly at worst. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, and with the early snows already dusting the mountains, even that distance might as well be 100 miles. A sharp gust rattled the ill-fitting window, sending a spray of snow across the wooden floor. Sarah had tried to chink the gaps with mud and straw, but her inexperienced efforts weren't holding. Every day revealed new problems she didn't know how to fix, new threats she wasn't equipped to face. The ledger's stark columns seemed to mock her from the table. According to its merciless arithmetic, they had perhaps a month before real hunger set in. Thomas had planned to hunt, to smoke meat for the winter, but Sarah had never held a rifle before his death. Her one attempt had left her shoulder bruised and their precious ammunition wasted. Emma's cough joined her brother's, a duet that struck terror into Sarah's heart. In Boston, there would be doctors, warm beds, proper medicine, everything her children needed to survive, everything she couldn't provide. "Just a little longer," she whispered, unsure if she was promising the children or herself. "We just need to hold on a little longer." Another wolf called, answered by a closer howl. Sarah clutched her children tighter, staring into the dying fire. She wouldn't surrender them to the Mitchells, wouldn't let them be raised in that cold world of proper manners and proper contempt. Thomas had wanted more for them, a life of open skies and honest work, of love unburdened by society's rigid expectations. But as the wind moaned through the cabin's many gaps and her children shivered in her arms, Sarah faced the brutal truth. Thomas's dream might cost their children's lives. The ledger sat on the table, its damning calculations illuminated by the last flickers of lamplight. Tomorrow she would check their stores again. Tomorrow she would find some way to make the impossible numbers add up to survival. Tonight she held her children and prayed for a miracle. The stranger materialized from the swirling snow like an answer to prayer, though Sarah had long since stopped believing in such things. His horse's hooves were muffled by the fresh powder, making him seem to glide through the grey morning like a spirit. Sarah grabbed Thomas's old rifle from beside the door, her hands shaking as she positioned herself between the approaching rider and her sleeping children. The weapon's familiar weight offered little comfort. She still didn't know how to use it properly, but the stranger wouldn't know that. He reined his horse to a stop at a respectful distance, raising gloved hands to show they were empty. "Ma'am," he called softly, his voice carrying clearly despite the wind. "Name's Luke McCall. Don't mean any harm." The rifle wavered in Sarah's grip. "What do you want?" "Saw your chimney smoke. In this weather, thought I should check." He nodded toward the thin wisp rising from their cabin. Mighty weak fire for a day like this. Before Sarah could respond, Emma's cough rattled from inside the cabin. Luke's expression shifted, concern replacing careful neutrality. "You got sick ones?" "In there." "We're fine," Sarah said quickly, but another bout of coughing betrayed her lie. Luke swung down from his horse, movements deliberate and slow. "Ma'am, I've got medicine in my saddlebags, and by the look of your roof, you could use some repairs before the next storm hits." He reached into his coat, and Sarah tensed, but he withdrew only a worn leather Bible. "I swear on God's word, I mean no harm to you or yours." A pressed flower peeked from between the Bible's pages, dried and delicate. Something about that detail, the tenderness it suggested in such a weathered man, made Sarah lower the rifle slightly. "You're no doctor," she said, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. "Army medic, before I took to ranching." He kept his distance, letting her maintain control of the situation. "That cough sounds like the start of winter fever. I've treated it before." James appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Mama, who's that?" "Go back inside, James." But her son had already spotted the horse. "Is he a cowboy?" The excitement in James's voice pierced Sarah's heart. He sounded so much like his father in that moment. Luke smiled, and the expression transformed his face, softening the hard lines carved by sun and wind. "Sure am, son. Got a ranch about 10 miles north." He glanced at Sarah. "Lost my wife and daughter to winter fever 5 years ago. Wouldn't wish that on anyone." The Bible in his hand trembled slightly at the admission, and Sarah suddenly understood the significance of that pressed flower. This man knew loss as intimately as she did. Emma's coughing started again, worse this time. Sarah felt the weight of her choices pressing down like the gathering snow. Pride versus survival, fear versus hope. "The medicine," she said finally. "What kind?" "Yarrow and elderberry mostly. Some other herbs my wife." He stopped, swallowed. "Things that help with fever and cough." Sarah stepped aside, letting him approach the cabin. As he passed, she caught the scent of leather and wood smoke, clean masculine smells that reminded her sharply of Thomas. Inside, Emma huddled under her blankets, face flushed with fever. Luke knelt beside her, movements gentle as he felt her forehead. The Bible slipped from his coat pocket, falling open to reveal more pressed flowers, carefully preserved between its pages. "Your wife?" Sarah asked softly, nodding toward the dried blooms. "Mary." His voice roughened. "She pressed a flower for every year we had together. Kept them in her Bible, now I keep them in mine." He turned his attention to his saddlebags, measuring herbs with practiced hands. Sarah watched him work, noting the precision of his movements, the quiet confidence that seemed to calm even Emma's. "Cough! That roof won't last another storm," he said as he helped Emma sip the medicinal tea. "Got tools in my saddlebags. Could fix it today, if you'll allow it." Sarah looked at her children's hopeful faces, at the way James hovered near this stranger who embodied everything his father had wanted to be. She thought of the food ledger's damning calculations, of the wolves drawing closer each night. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why help us?" Luke met her gaze steadily. "Because 5 years ago I was alone in a storm and someone helped me. Way I figure it, that's what we're here for, helping each other through the hard times." The wind rattled the loose boards he'd mentioned, and Sarah made her decision. "The roof," she said. "Just the roof." But even as she spoke, she wondered if she was already letting in more than just this stranger's help. 3 days after Luke's arrival, the town courier trudged through the snow with a letter that shattered their fragile peace. Sarah recognized the Mitchell family lawyer's elaborate letterhead before she even broke the seal. Her hands trembled. As she read, the thick paper crackling in her grip, Luke looked up from where he was showing James how to repair a chair leg. "Bad news? They're coming." Sarah's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "The Mitchells. They've filed for custody. In Boston, they're sending someone to collect the children." Emma pressed against her mother's side, small fingers clutching Sarah's skirt. The girl's cough had improved with Luke's medicine, but fear now made her breath catch. "We don't have to go, do we, Mama?" Luke set down his tools, his expression hardening. "Mind if I see that letter?" Sarah handed it over, watching as he read the flowing script, his jaw tightening with each line. The lawyer's words were polite, cultured, and utterly merciless. The Mitchells would prove Sarah an unfit mother. They would demonstrate that the children's very lives were endangered by her selfish and reckless decision to remain in the wilderness. "They're not wrong," Sarah whispered, sinking into a chair. "Look at us. No proper food, no proper medicine. If Emma's cough hadn't improved—" "Stop!" Luke's voice was gentle but firm. "You're giving those children something Boston never could, a mother's love and the freedom to grow into themselves." He hesitated, then added, "I've seen what Boston society does to young souls. My Mary came from that world." Sarah looked up sharply. "Your wife was from Boston?" Luke nodded, his eyes distant. "Daughter of a shipping merchant. Ran away to marry a common soldier. Her family disowned her, but she never regretted it. Said she'd rather have love and honest work than all the silk dresses in Massachusetts." James tugged at Luke's sleeve. "Did you love her a lot?" "More than breathing, son." Luke ruffled the boy's hair. "And she gave me 10 perfect years and a beautiful daughter before God called them home." Sarah studied him, seeing past the rough exterior to the deep wells of pain and love beneath. "What happened?" "Winter fever, like I told you. But it was more than that. Her family," he took a deep breath. "When they heard she was sick, they offered help. But there were conditions. They wanted her to leave me, bring our Katie back east. She refused, and his hands clenched. They delayed the doctor they'd promised to send. By the time he arrived, it was too late." The letter seemed to burn in Sarah's hands. She saw the same pattern repeating, wealthy families using their power to break apart loves they deemed inappropriate. "They'll take them," she whispered. "They have all the advantages, money, lawyers, society's approval. They have everything except what matters most." Luke knelt before her chair, his eyes intense. "Sarah, look at your children. Really look." She did. James, stronger after 3 days of proper meals, proudly showing off the woodworking Luke had taught him. Emma, her fever broken, sketching with the charcoal and paper Luke had produced from his seemingly endless saddlebags. "They're thriving," Luke said softly. "Not just surviving, but growing into themselves. You think Boston finishing schools and rigid etiquette would serve them better than this freedom? But the letter is paper and ink." Luke stood, his presence somehow filling the small cabin. "I've seen my share of battles, Sarah. Know what matters isn't the size of the army, but the worth of what you're fighting for." Emma brought over her drawing, a simple but touching sketch of their cabin, smoke rising straight and strong from a properly repaired chimney. In her childish art, she'd added Luke's horse in the yard and a garden she hoped they'd plant in spring. "This is home," Emma said firmly. "We don't want another one." Sarah pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her hair, no longer fever-sweet, but clean and healthy. Luke's medicines, his repairs, his quiet strength. In 3 days, he'd given them more than the Mitchells had in months of grudging charity. "Then we'll fight," Sarah said, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. "But Luke, you don't have to." "Yes, ma'am, I do." He smiled, the expression warming his weathered face. "Some battles choose us, and I aim to see this one through." The letter lay forgotten on the table as they began to plan their defense, none of them noticing how close Luke and Sarah had drawn together, or how naturally the children looked to him for guidance. Some battles, it seemed, were worth more than their obvious stakes. The sound of James's laughter drifted through the morning air as Luke taught him how to measure boards for the new chicken coop. Sarah paused in her bread-making to watch through the window, her heart catching at how naturally they worked together, the boy mimicking Luke's sure movements. "Look, Mama." Emma pushed a fresh drawing across the table. "It's our family." Sarah studied the charcoal sketch, her throat tightening. Emma had drawn them all together, Sarah and Luke standing close, James proudly holding tools, and Emma herself feeding imagined chickens. Above the scene, she'd written in careful letters, "Our home." "It's beautiful, sweetheart." Sarah touched the paper gently, noting how Emma had captured Luke's slight smile, the one he seemed to reserve just for them. "Mr. Luke showed me how to shade things properly." Emma added another careful line to the cabin's shadow. "He says artists need to see what's really there, not just what we think we see." Sarah glanced out again. Luke was now showing James how to hold a saw, his hands patient and steady on the boy's smaller ones. 2 weeks had transformed their lives in ways Sarah was only beginning to understand. The cabin was warm, the roof sound, and her children's cheeks were rosy with health instead of fever. But it was more than just physical improvements. Luke had brought something else, a sense of possibility, of hope. He taught James practical skills with the same gentle patience he used to guide Emma's artwork. And Sarah, she touched her collar, remembering yesterday's moment in the barn. She'd been struggling with a hay bale when Luke stepped up behind her, his hands covering hers to show her the proper lifting technique. The warmth of him, the clean scent of his soap, had made her forget to breathe. "Mama?" Emma's voice pulled her back. "Are we keeping him?" "Emma, we can't just—" "But he needs us too." Emma pointed to her drawing. "See how I made him smiling? He didn't smile like that before. Miss Jenkins at church said he was always alone at his ranch, ever since his family went to heaven." Sarah studied her daughter's earnest face. "You've been watching him closely. Like he taught me, seeing what's really there." Emma added another detail to her drawing. "He keeps Mama Mary's flowers in his Bible, but he talks to us about her now. Before, he just stayed quiet when people mentioned her." Outside, James let out a whoop of triumph as his board split cleanly along the pencil line. Luke's proud grin matched the boy's excitement perfectly. "I remember your father's flowers," Sarah said softly. "He'd bring them to us on Sundays." Emma nodded. "But it doesn't make you sad anymore when you talk about Papa. Not like before." "No, I suppose it doesn't." Sarah touched the drawing again, tracing the simple lines that somehow captured their growing contentment. The door opened, bringing a burst of cold air, and two proud carpenters. James rushed to show his sister the smooth-cut board, while Luke moved to warm his hands by the stove. "Something smells good," he said, glancing at Sarah's bread dough. "Mama's teaching me to bake," Emma announced. "Like you're teaching James about building. Is that so?" Luke peered at Emma's drawing, and Sarah saw the moment he registered what it depicted. His expression softened, but something like uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "Emma has quite a talent," he said carefully, not quite meeting Sarah's gaze. "She sees truly," Sarah replied, surprising herself with her boldness. "Things as they are, and perhaps as they could be." Luke's eyes snapped to hers, hope and caution warring in their depths. James chose that moment to proudly show off his board, breaking the tension. "Well done, son," Luke said automatically, then froze at his own words. But James just beamed brighter, and Emma added another detail to her drawing, a second saw, sized for smaller hands, hanging on the cabin wall. A tool of one's own, a place of belonging. "Mr. Luke," Emma held up her picture. "Could we maybe have chickens before spring? Real ones, not just drawn ones." Luke's laugh held a hint of relief at the safe topic. "We'll need to finish the coop first, and your mama will have to agree." "Our home needs chickens," Emma said firmly, pointing to her drawing as evidence. "Our home." Sarah watched Luke's hand, trembled slightly as he touched the corner of Emma's paper, his finger tracing the simple words the same way he touched the pressed flowers in his Bible, like something precious and fragile and real. "Yes," he said softly, his eyes meeting Sarah's. "I suppose it does." The wolves came during the darkest part of night. Sarah woke to their howls, closer than ever before, and the sound of Luke moving swiftly through the cabin. "Stay inside," he whispered, checking his rifle. "Bar the door behind me. Luke." She caught his arm, words failing as their eyes met in the faint firelight. "I'll be careful." His hand covered hers briefly. "But they're too close. They've been watching us, growing bolder. Like the Mitchells," Sarah thought but didn't say. Another kind of predator, circling their home, testing for weakness. The children stirred as Luke slipped out. Sarah barred the door and added wood to the fire, trying to make her movements calm and sure, despite her racing heart. "Mama?" Emma's voice quavered. "Are the wolves coming?" "Mr. Luke won't let them," James said with complete conviction. The faith in his voice made Sarah's chest ache. The howls grew closer. Then a shot cracked through the night. Sarah clutched her children. As more shots followed, punctuated by snarls and a man's shout. The minutes stretched like hours, until finally, mercifully, came a knock at the door. "Sarah, it's done." She rushed to unbar the door. Luke stood there, snow-dusted and breathing hard, a massive wolf carcass at his feet. Blood stained the snow. Some his, where claws had caught his arm. "You're hurt, just a scratch, but they won't trouble us again." He dragged the wolf inside, where the firelight revealed its true size. "Pack leader. The others will move on now." Sarah cleaned his wound while the children examined the wolf with fascinated horror. Its pelt was thick, grey, streaked with silver, beautiful despite its savage end. "Can we keep it?" James asked. "Like a trophy?" "Might as well," Luke said. "Pelts are valuable, and we could use the reminder." "Reminder of what?" Emma touched the fur cautiously. "That we can protect what's ours." Luke's eyes met Sarah's over the bandage she was winding. "No matter what comes hunting." The next morning brought Henry Jenkins, their closest neighbor, riding hard through the snow. "Mitchell man in town," he reported grimly, asking questions, making threats barely dressed up as legal talk. Sarah's hands clenched in her skirts. "What kind of threats?" "Says if you don't comply peacefully, they'll send the law. Says they've got proof you're unfit." Henry's eyes moved to Luke. "Been telling folks there's an inappropriate situation here." Luke's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "Neighbors believing it?" "Some. Others remember how you helped when my Annie was sick last winter." Reckon a man who'd ride through a blizzard to save a neighbor's wife ain't the kind they're painting you as. The children need protection, Sarah said firmly. Luke provides that. And more besides, if folks' eyes don't deceive them. Henry's weathered face softened. Annie wants you to know, you've got friends here. We ain't forgetting how Thomas helped us establish our claim. After Henry left, Luke took out his rifle again. Time you learn to shoot properly. Sarah, startled. What? Can't always count on someone else being here. Need to know you can protect yourself and the young ones. He led her behind the cabin where he'd set up targets, old cans on a fallen log. The wolf pelt dried nearby, a stark reminder of last night's dangers. Hand goes here. Luke positioned her carefully. Sight down the barrel. Breathe out slow. As you squeeze the trigger, his body curved around hers, adjusting her stance. Sarah tried to focus on his instructions rather than the warm strength of him, the way his voice rumbled near her ear. The shot went wide. Again, he said patiently. You've got steel in you, Sarah. Same steel that kept you and yours alive all these months. Just need to learn to use it. By sunset, she'd hit more targets than she'd missed. Her shoulder ached, but pride warmed her chest. The Mitchells are used to people backing down, Luke said as they walked back, to money and influence winning the day. But they've never met a mama wolf protecting her cubs. Sarah looked at the grey pelt, thinking of teeth and claws and the fierce courage of desperate love. No, she said softly, they haven't. Inside, Emma had dinner waiting, simple stew but made with care. She'd drawn another picture, the wolf, fearsome but somehow noble, with their cabin safe behind it. For the wall, she said, so we remember. Sarah hung it next to the drying pelt, these twin testimonies to what they'd become. A family with teeth, ready to defend their own. The nightmare came, without warning. Sarah woke to Luke's shout from the barn loft where he'd been sleeping. Without thinking, she grabbed her shawl and hurried through the moonlit snow. She found him tangled in blankets, fighting invisible enemies. No, get them out. The hospital's burning. Luke. She touched his shoulder gently. Luke, wake up. He jerked awake, eyes wild until recognition dawned. Sarah, forgive me, did I wake the children? They're still asleep. She sat beside him, noting the papers scattered from his thrashing. One caught her eye. Official letterhead, military seals. Luke followed her gaze and seemed to deflate. Suppose you ought to know. Been meaning to tell you anyway. He picked up the discharge papers, hands steadying as he held them in the lantern light. Served as a field medic. Saw things. Did things. You don't have to. Yes, I do. His voice was rough, because sometimes it comes back, like tonight. And because if I'm staying, if you want me to stay, you should know what kind of man you're trusting. Sarah read the papers, understanding growing with each line. Decorated for valor under fire. Multiple commendations for lives saved beyond the call of duty. And between the formal language, hints of horror. Burning field hospitals, endless casualties, impossible choices. Last battle was the worst, Luke said quietly. Hospital tent caught fire during an attack. Had to choose who to save first. Some were too badly hurt to move quickly. You can't save everyone, Sarah whispered. Tried anyway, got burned pretty bad. He pulled up his sleeve, showing scars she'd glimpsed before but never asked about. Medical discharge. Couldn't hold instruments steady enough after that. Some days still can't. Sarah noticed his hands trembling now and covered them with her own. Is that why you became a rancher? Partly. Needed space, silence. Then Mary... A smile touched his lips, despite the pain in his eyes. She was a volunteer at the recovery hospital. Said my scars meant I was the kind of man who'd run into fire for others. Said that's exactly what she wanted in a husband. She was right. Sarah's thumb traced his scarred palm. These hands built our chicken coop, fixed our roof, saved Emma's life. Sarah, his voice caught. When I found you all here, it was like God giving me a second chance, to save someone, to be more than my nightmares. Emma's cough drifted from the cabin, and Luke tensed. Sarah squeezed his hands. Just a normal cough now. Thanks to you, not just me. You're stronger than you know, keeping them alive all those months alone." He shook his head. "Mary would have liked you. Said I'd need someone strong after she was gone. Made me promise to find love again, if I could." The word hung between them, delicate as frost. Sarah thought of Thomas's similar words, his last plea for her to find happiness again. "The Mitchells," she said softly, "they'll use anything against us. Your past, let them try." Steel entered his voice. "I've faced worse enemies than Boston lawyers, and this time I'm not fighting alone." A wolf howled in the distance, not threatening now, just part of the night's wild music. Sarah found herself leaning against Luke's shoulder, his arm wrapping naturally around her. "In the hospital," he said, "Mary used to sing to the soldiers, said music heals what medicine can't reach." He hummed a few notes, a sweet, simple tune. "Emma sings that sometimes," Sarah realized. "You taught her. She reminds me of my Katie, same gentle heart, same way of seeing beauty in broken things." He touched the discharge papers. "Like mother, like daughter." Sarah thought of Emma's drawings, their growing family rendered in loving detail, every scar and imperfection transformed into something precious. "Stay," she whispered. "Not just until spring, not just until the Mitchells. Stay." Luke's arms tightened around her. "I'm not running anymore. Whatever comes, we face it together." They sat in comfortable silence until dawn painted the snow gold. When they returned to the cabin, Emma was adding to her latest drawing. Luke in his army uniform, but not fighting. Instead, he was helping. Wounded soldiers, Mary at his side. Below it she'd written, "Our hero." "Heard you talking," Emma said. "About the hospital, about being brave." Luke knelt beside her, touching the picture with wondering fingers. "You're not afraid of my scars, my nightmares?" "Mama says scars mean you survived." Emma hugged him fiercely. "And nightmares can't get you when family's near." Sarah watched them, feeling her own scarred heart healing. Sometimes love came quietly, in shared pain and gentle understanding. Sometimes it came like dawn after a long night, turning shadows into gold. The town of Clearwater wasn't much. A church, a general store, and a handful of other weathered buildings huddled against the Wyoming wind. But as Luke drove their wagon down the rutted main street, it might as well have been Boston for all, the eyes watching them. "Remember," Luke said quietly, "head high, we've nothing to be ashamed of." Sarah nodded, though her hands clutched her skirts tightly. Emma and James sat between them on the wagon seat, freshly scrubbed and wearing their best clothes. They needed supplies, and hiding away would only feed the gossip. The town meeting minutes, posted outside the church, told the story of their scandal in careful, measured script. Motion raised by Reverend Simmons regarding the propriety of unmarried persons cohabitating within parish boundaries. Particular concern noted regarding the Mitchell widow and the McCall rancher. Discussion of moral examples for parish children. "They didn't even use my name properly," Sarah murmured. "Just the Mitchell widow. Folks who'd reduce you to—" "That don't know you at all," Luke replied, helping her down from the wagon. Inside the general store, Mrs. Henderson's disapproving sniff spoke volumes, but her husband's eyes were kinder as he measured out flour and coffee. "Heard the children were sick," he said. "Doing better now?" "Much better, thank you," Sarah replied. "Luke's medicine—" "Luke, is it?" Mrs. Henderson interrupted. "Not Mr. McCall?" Before Sarah could respond, Emma stepped forward. "Mr. Luke saved my life, and James's too. The wolves would have got us if he hadn't been there." The storekeeper's wife blinked at the child's fierce defense. "Well, that's God's own truth," Mr. Henderson finished firmly. "Like when he saved my Annie last winter. He added extra penny candy to their order. No charge for these." Outside, they ran into Reverend Simmons himself. The pastor's face wore its Sunday best expression of concern. "Mrs. Mitchell and Mr. McCall, the church council has been discussing your situation." "Have they?" Luke's voice was dangerously quiet. We understand frontier life presents certain necessities, but appearances must be considered. The children's moral welfare is better served by a man who'd risk his life for them than by those who'd let them freeze for propriety's sake, Sarah cut in, surprising herself with her boldness. The Reverend flushed. Now see here. No, you see here. Luke stepped forward, and though his voice stayed gentle, something in it made the pastor step back. You've read about Good Samaritans on Sunday? We're living it every day. You want to judge that? Take it up with the Lord. James tugged at the Reverend's coat. Sir, could you come see our chicken coop? Mr. Luke taught me to build it myself. He says, honest work's the best prayer a man can make. The pastor's expression softened slightly. Did he now? And he reads us Bible stories, Emma added. He has his own, with flowers in it, from when his wife was alive. Sarah saw the change in Reverend Simmons's face the moment he stopped seeing scandal and started seeing family. Perhaps, he said slowly, I should pay a pastoral visit, see these improvements for myself. You'd be welcome, Sarah said. Sunday, after services? A crowd had gathered, watching this exchange. Sarah saw the moment ripple through them. The respectable widow and the honorable rancher attending church and receiving their pastor. It changed the story they'd been telling themselves. They finished their shopping and loaded the wagon. As Luke helped Sarah up, his hand lingered on hers, longer than strictly necessary. Let them see, she thought. Let them see what real love looks like. At the church door, someone had added a note beneath the meeting minutes. Motion amended. Consideration to be given to circumstances of mutual aid and Christian charity. Community support recommended for families facing hardship, regardless of composition. The next name in the ledger was Annie Henderson's, followed by a dozen more, their neighbors, choosing kindness over judgment. It's a start, Luke said as they drove home. More than that, Sarah replied. It's hope. The children had fallen asleep against them, tired from their big day in town. They looked, Sarah realized, exactly like Emma's drawings. A family, whole and real and unashamed. They'll talk about us at the next meeting, she said. Let them. We'll give them something worth talking about. A family that chose love over fear, truth over appearances. And if the Mitchells hear, Luke's arm tightened around them all, then they'll learn what they're really up against. Not just us, but a whole community that's learned to see with its heart. The sun was setting as they reached home, painting their little cabin in colors Emma would want to draw. Sarah touched the wolf pelt they'd hung by the door. Their first trophy, their first victory. There would be more battles ahead, but they'd face them together, strong in the light of love and honest hearts. The blizzard struck without warning, turning the world white and trapping them inside for what would become 3 of the most precious days of Sarah's life. Luke had moved into the cabin proper, propriety giving way to practicality as the temperature plunged. Might as well make something useful, he said that first afternoon, bringing out a stack of fabric scraps he'd traded for in town. Mary taught me quilting during long hospital nights, said idle hands make for troubled minds. Sarah spread the pieces across the table, bits of calico, worn denim from James's old trousers, soft flannel from Emma's outgrown nightgown. We're making a quilt, a family project. He smiled at the children's eager faces. Everyone contributes. Something? Emma held up a piece of faded blue cotton. This was from Mama's Sunday dress. And this, James added, pointing to a sturdy brown patch, is from Mr. Luke's old shirt, the one that got torn when he fought the wolves. They worked as the storm raged, sharing stories with each stitch. Luke taught Emma how to piece patterns, together while James sorted colors with surprising artistic sense. Sarah found herself working beside Luke, their hands sometimes brushing as they passed needle and thread. This piece, Luke said softly, holding up a scrap of delicate floral print, was from Mary's favorite apron. She wore it the day we met. Sarah touched the fabric gently. Tell us. His eyes grew distant with memory, but his smile remained warm. She was serving soup to wounded soldiers, looked like an angel in the lamplight, wearing this print and a smile that could heal broken spirits. "Like Mama," Emma said matter-of-factly, threading her needle. "She makes everything better too." Luke's eyes met Sarah's over their daughter's head. "Yes," he said softly, "she does." The quilt grew as the storm howled outside. Each piece held a memory, each stitch bound them closer. Sarah added a patch from Thomas's old shirt, and the children listened solemnly to stories of their fathers. Dreams for them. "He would have liked this," Sarah said, smoothing the fabric, "all of us together, making something beautiful from pieces of the past." "Look," James pointed to the window. "The snow's dancing." They paused their work to watch the swirling flakes, the cabin warm and secure around them. Emma started humming Mary's old hospital song, and Luke's deep voice joined her, teaching them all the words. That night, they pushed the furniture back and laid their bedrolls close to the fire. The half-finished quilt covered them all, its mismatched pieces somehow perfect together. "Tell us a story, Mr. Luke," James asked sleepily. "What kind?" "A love story," Emma decided, "about you and Mama." Sarah felt Luke's startled pause, but his voice came steady and sure. "Well, once there was a lonely rancher who'd forgotten how to trust in happiness. Then one day he found a brave mama and her two amazing children, and they taught him that love's bigger than loss. That family's not just what you're born to, but what you choose." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes as Luke's story wove their past months together into something magical, yet utterly true. The children drifted off to his gentle words, leaving them alone in the firelight. "Did I overstep?" he whispered. Sarah touched his hand where it rested on the quilt. "No, you told it exactly right." His fingers laced with hers, warm and sure. Outside, the storm had softened to gentle snow, but neither of them moved to separate their bedrolls. "Sarah," he started, then paused as Emma shifted in her sleep, curling closer to them both. "I know," she whispered. "Me too." The quilt covered them like a blessing as they slept, their hands still joined beneath its patchwork of memories. In the morning, Emma added a new piece, part of her hair ribbon, bright red against the other colors. "For our love," she explained, "all of us." Together, they finished the quilt as the storm cleared, each person adding a final touch. Luke's precise stitches formed a border of tiny hearts. James insisted on adding a wolf track pattern in one corner, because that's when our family really started. Sarah embroidered their names, all four of them, in her neat script. When they hung it on the cabin wall, it was more than warmth against winter's chill. It was their story, love and loss, courage and hope, four separate lives woven into something, stronger and more beautiful than any could have been alone. "Perfect," Luke said, his arm slipping naturally around Sarah's waist as they admired their work. "No," Emma corrected, taking their free hands. "Not perfect, real, like us." Cornelius Blackwood III arrived on a Wednesday, his fine Boston suit absurdly pristine against the muddy spring thaw. He carried a leather portfolio and an ornate silver frame that caught the morning light as he stepped down from the hired wagon. Sarah recognized the portrait inside before he held it up. Her children posed stiffly in their Boston best, their grandfather's hand heavy on their shoulders. It had been taken just after Thomas's death, before everything fell apart. "Mrs. Mitchell." Blackwood's smile was practiced perfection. "I trust you recognize your children as they should be, as they can be again." Luke appeared in the cabin doorway, his quiet presence steadying her. James and Emma pressed against her skirts, faces wary. "My children are exactly as they should be," Sarah said firmly. "Right here, with me, with you." Blackwood's eyes slid to Luke, then back to his portfolio. "And Mr. McCall, yes, we've heard about that arrangement, most concerning to the family." "State your business, Mr. Blackwood." Luke's voice was courteous but held steel. The lawyer removed several documents with flourishing precision. "The Mitchells are prepared to be generous, a comfortable allowance for Mrs. Mitchell, provided she returns to Boston. The children naturally would live with their grandparents. Proper schooling, proper society? No. Emma's voice startled them all. She stood straight, so different from the posed child in the portrait. We won't go. Blackwood's smile tightened. My dear, you hardly understand. We understand plenty, James interrupted. Grandfather only wants us because we're Mitchells. But we're more than that now. Sarah felt Luke's hand brush her shoulder, grounding her as Blackwood's face darkened. This wild place has clearly corrupted them, he said. Running wild, speaking out of turn, consorting with family. Luke cut in quietly. With people who love them for who they are, not what name they bear. Blackwood pulled out another document. The courts take a dim view of moral corruption. Mrs. Mitchell, a widow living unchaperoned with a man of questionable background. Questionable. Emma's voice rose. Show him your papers, Pa. Show him how you saved all those soldiers. The word Pa hung in the air. Blackwood's eyebrows rose as Luke's army discharge papers appeared in Emma's hands. She'd run to fetch them from their special place by the quilt. Decorated for valor, she read proudly. That means he's a hero. And he saved me and James. From the fever, and Mama from being alone, and all of us from the wolves. A child's fantasy, Blackwood scoffed, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Sarah took the portrait from him, studying it. Her children looked like expensive dolls, their eyes vacant and afraid. Nothing like the strong, sure children who stood before him now. Look at them, Mr. Blackwood, she said quietly. Really look. Do they seem corrupted to you? Or do they seem loved? As if to answer, James proudly showed off his calloused hands. I helped build our chicken coop, and I can read better now. Pa teaches us every night. Emma too. And I can draw, Emma added. Real drawings, not just copying like in Boston. Pa says artists have to see with their hearts. Blackwood looked. From the portrait to the living children, his legal certainties crumbling. The Mitchells only want what's best. Then they should want this, Luke said, his arm sliding fully around Sarah. A home filled with love, children free to grow into themselves, a family built on choice rather than obligation. The courts, Blackwood began weakly. We'll see what everyone else does, Sarah finished. 4 people who chose each other, who built something real from broken pieces, who face every challenge together. Emma tugged at the lawyer's coat. Would you like to see my drawings? I did. One of our whole family after we made the quilt. Even put in Mary's flowers from Pa's Bible, because she's part of our story too. Something shifted in Blackwood's face. Recognition, perhaps, of a truth his legal papers couldn't capture. He looked again at the portrait, then at the thriving family before him. I will have to consult with the Mitchells, he said finally. These circumstances are unexpected. After he left, they stood together watching his wagon disappear. The portrait lay abandoned on their table, a relic of the past that no longer held power. Did you mean it? Luke asked softly. Calling me Pa. Emma hugged him, fierce and quick. You've been Pa for ages. We were just waiting for you to notice. Sarah leaned into his embrace, feeling James and Emma crowd close. Outside, spring bloomed across the Wyoming hills, full of new beginnings. Let them consult, she said. We know who we are. Sarah found the journal while spring cleaning, tucked away in a trunk of Thomas's things. Most pages were blank, but the first few held his thoughts about their move west, his dreams for their children, his love for her. That evening, after the children were asleep, she sat by lamplight and began to write, Dear Thomas, the children called Luke Pa today. My heart should have broken, but instead it felt right, like something healing rather than something lost. Is that a betrayal? Or is it what you meant in your last days, when you made me promise to find joy again? She paused, watching Luke teach James to whittle by the fire. Their heads bent together, dark and fair, sharing secrets of blade and wood. He loves them as you did, she wrote, not trying to replace you, but building on the foundation you laid. Emma draws like you now, seeing beauty in unexpected places. James has your laugh, especially when Luke teaches him something new. A splash of water made her look up. Emma was helping Luke wash dishes, telling him about her latest drawing. Their hands were sudsy, and somehow soap bubbles had gotten in Luke's beard. His mock stern expression made Emma giggle. Sarah's pen moved again. Sometimes I watch them and forget to breathe. This thing between us, it's not desperate or rushed. It grows like spring after winter, natural as breathing. When did his smile become as necessary as air? Penny, for your thoughts. Luke's voice startled her. The children had gone to bed, and he sat beside her, smelling of soap and wood shavings, just writing. About family, about... She hesitated, then offered him the journal. He read carefully, his face softening at Thomas's words. When he reached her new entries, his hands trembled slightly. Sarah, his voice was rough. I never meant to... I know. She touched his hand. That's why it works. You never tried to replace him. You just loved us as we are. How could I not? His fingers laced with hers. You're the bravest woman I've ever known, taking on the wilderness, the Mitchells, raising these amazing children. We're better together, she said softly. Stronger. His free hand cupped her cheek, and the world held its breath. When he kissed her, it was gentle as morning light, warm as the spring sun on new grass. Emma's delighted gasp broke the moment. They turned to find both children watching from the bedroom door, faces glowing. Finally! Emma bounced on her toes. I was running out of space to draw hearts around you both in my pictures. James just grinned. Does this mean we can call you Pa all the time now? Luke's laugh was shaky but joyful. Come here, you rascals. They piled onto the bench, a tangle of arms and happy chaos. Sarah found her journal, knocked aside in the confusion, and wrote one last line. Thomas, I understand now. Love doesn't divide when you share it. It multiplies. Our family hasn't replaced what was lost, but grown into something new and wonderful. The children have two fathers to guide them now, one in memory, one in life. And I have room in my heart for both the joy we shared and this new happiness. What happens next? James asked, playing with Luke's rough fingers. Well, Luke said carefully, that depends on your mama. And on all of us, really. We could make it official, Emma suggested. Like in my drawings, all of us together properly. Sarah met Luke's eyes over their children's heads, saw the question there. Are you asking something, Luke McCall? His smile was sunlight breaking through clouds. Might be, though I always pictured doing it more formally, with a ring at least. Rings are just circles, Emma declared. Our quilt's better. It has our whole story in it. Smart girl, Luke chuckled. But your mama deserves proper courting, proper asking. Sarah touched his cheek, feeling the future unfold before them bright as morning. You've been courting us for months, with every repair to our home, every lesson with the children, every gentle word. As for asking, she smiled, some questions answer themselves. He kissed her again, soft and sure, while their children cheered. Later, Sarah added a final note to her journal. Love's not a replacement for what's lost, but a light that shows the way forward. Luke understands that. He carries Mary's memory as gently as he holds our hearts. Together, we're learning that joy can grow from sorrow, and family is something you choose every day. The children see it clearest. Love's not divided when shared, but multiplied beyond measure. The spring earth was rich and dark beneath Sarah's fingers as she and Luke prepared the garden beds. He'd brought seeds from his ranch, vegetables, herbs and flowers that Mary had once grown. Now they would bloom again in this new soil, this new life they were building. See how the seed feels warm. Luke showed James, pouring corn kernels into the boy's small palm. That means it's ready to grow. Everything that's meant to be carries its own time inside it. Emma carefully planted the flower seeds Mary had saved, marigolds and zinnias that would border their vegetable patch with color. Will they be the same as the ones in your Bible, Pa? Maybe even better, Luke said, because you're planting them with love. Sarah watched them work together, remembering Thomas's dreams of their own farm. Now those dreams were taking root. in ways she'd never imagined, growing into something equally beautiful but uniquely their own. "We should expand the chicken coop," Luke said, marking rows for beans. "Make room for more layers before winter, and maybe add a proper barn. Give James a calf to raise." "A calf?" James's eyes lit up. "My own? Need to learn responsibility if you're going to help run this place someday." Luke ruffled his hair. "Your mama and I have been talking, thinking of combining our properties, my ranch and this homestead. Make one big family farm." Sarah's heart swelled at how naturally he included them all in his future. The ring he'd given her last week caught the spring sunlight, simple and perfect as his love. "Can we plant an apple tree?" Emma asked. "Like the ones in Boston, but ours." "Apple trees take years to fruit," Sarah cautioned. "That's all right," Emma said firmly. "We'll be here, we can wait." Luke's eyes met Sarah's over their daughter's head, sharing the joy of that simple certainty. They would be here, watching saplings grow into trees, seeds into harvests, children into adults. "Your father would be proud," Luke said softly, as the children ran to fetch more water. "Seeing his dreams take root like this, he is proud." Sarah touched the locket that held Thomas's picture. "I feel it every time I see them thriving, every time you help them grow." A meadowlark called from the new fence posts, another of Luke's improvements. The garden was just the beginning. Already he'd drawn plans for expanding the cabin, adding rooms for their growing family. The thought made Sarah blush, remembering how they'd whispered about brothers or sisters for Emma and James during their quiet evening moments. "I've been thinking," Luke said, carefully transplanting the tomato seedlings he'd started indoors. "Maybe we should have a proper wedding here, not in town, but right here on our land. Let everyone see what we're building." "The Mitchells won't approve," Sarah said, but she was smiling. "Good thing we're not asking their permission." Luke's eyes crinkled. "Besides, Emma's already designing your dress. Says it needs flowers like the ones we're planting. New blooms for new beginnings." James returned with the water bucket, proudly carrying it himself. "Pa showed me how to calculate how many ears of corn we'll get," he announced. "If we do the math right, we'll have plenty for winter." Sarah remembered the desperate calculations in her food ledger just months ago. Now her son spoke confidently of abundance, of futures measured in harvests rather than losses. Emma had begun humming Mary's old hospital song as she planted, adding her own words about growing things and family love. The tune drifted across their expanding garden like a blessing. "We should save some seeds," she declared, "from the prettiest. Flowers, put them in Pa's Bible with Mary's, so next year's garden has both kinds of memories in it." Luke's hands stilled in the earth. Sarah saw the shine in his eyes as he nodded. "Wise girl, that's exactly what we'll do." They worked until sunset, all four of them dirty and tired and happy. The planted rows stretched neat and full of promise, ready for spring rain and summer sun. Like their family, Sarah thought. Given the right conditions, love would grow wild and strong. That night, she added the day's seed packets to their memory box, alongside Luke's discharge papers and Thomas's letters. Emma had decorated each packet with drawings, their whole family planting together, the future blooming before them. "Next year's garden will be even bigger," James said sleepily, as Luke tucked him in. "Yes, it will, son," Luke promised. "Next year and all the years after, as big as our love can grow." The lawyers arrived like storm clouds on a summer day, 3 of them in pristine Eastern suits. Their wagon kicked up dust along the newly planted fields, making Emma's flowers bow their heads as if in warning. Luke saw them first from where he was mending fence. His hammer paused mid-swing as he counted the riders. "Sarah!" he called, his voice carrying the same warning as thunder before rain. She was already moving, sending the children inside with quiet urgency. They'd practiced for this, rehearsed it like a fire drill. James and Emma knew to gather their important things. Luke's Bible with its precious flowers, Sarah's journal, Thomas's letters, and Emma's drawings. The lead lawyer stepped down, holding a thick envelope like a weapon. Mrs. Mitchell, we bring a custody petition from the children's grandparents. Sarah stood in her doorway, soil still fresh under her nails from the morning's gardening. I won't let you take them. This isn't a request, madam. It's a court order. He thrust the papers forward. The Mitchell family seal glared red as a fresh wound. Luke appeared at Sarah's side, his presence solid as their cabin's walls. His hand found hers, work-roughened fingers intertwining. You'll want to read these carefully, the second lawyer said, his Boston accent dripping with false sympathy. The evidence of moral corruption is quite thoroughly documented. Moral corruption? Luke's voice was deadly quiet. You mean love? Family? Honest work? We mean, the third lawyer stepped forward, an unmarried man living with a widow, children being raised without proper education or society, religious and moral instruction being neglected in favor of frontier barbarism. The words hung in the air like smoke. Then a small voice rang out, "That's a lie!" Emma stood in the doorway, clutching Luke's Bible. She opened it, pressed flowers cascading like bits of remembered sunshine. Pa reads to us every night, stories about love and courage and doing what's right. And he teaches us proper things, too. James can do sums better than I ever could in Boston. She's right. James appeared beside his sister, proudly holding up the ledger where he tracked their crop plantings. I can calculate yields and profits. Pa says that's more useful than dancing lessons. The lawyers exchanged glances, clearly unprepared for articulate, confident children. The first one rallied. Nevertheless, the court has ruled. The court ruled without hearing our side, Sarah interrupted, taking the custody papers. Without seeing our home, our family, our life here. A life of hardship and deprivation. The second lawyer sneered. Look at you, dirt on your hands, mending your own clothes, living by our own work. Luke cut in, teaching these children values you can't learn in a Boston parlor. Dignity, resilience, real love. Love? The third lawyer laughed. Is that what you call this arrangement? It's what we call family. Sarah's voice rang with quiet strength. And if you think your papers can break that, you don't understand what you're fighting. Inside the cabin, Emma had begun to sing Mary's old hospital song. The sweet notes drifted out, carrying memories of healing and hope. The lawyers shifted uncomfortably. The Mitchells are prepared to be generous. The first lawyer tried again. A comfortable allowance, a suitable house in Boston. We have a home, James said firmly. We're building it together. Luke stepped forward, his voice pitched for the lawyers alone. You tell the Mitchells this. I've faced armies and survived. I've lost one family and found the strength to love again. If they want these children, they'll have to go through me, and I promise you, gentlemen, that's a fight they don't want. The lead lawyer studied Luke's face, seeing perhaps the soldier. Behind, the rancher's calm. The courts will hear from us, Sarah said, from our neighbors who've watched us build this life, from the pastor who's seen our family worship together, from the teacher who's marked James's perfect sums. Emma appeared with her latest drawing, their family working the Springfields together, every face glowing with joy. And they'll see this, she said, what love really looks like. The lawyers retreated to their wagon, muttering about further legal action. But Sarah saw the doubt in their eyes, the recognition that they faced something stronger than law books and court orders. As the dust settled behind their departure, Luke gathered them all close. You were magnificent, he told. The children, brave as lions. We just told the truth, Emma said simply, like you taught us. Sarah looked at the custody papers, then deliberately fed them into the stove. They caught fire quickly, turning to ash like the Mitchells' plans. What now? James asked. Luke smiled, the expression fierce and proud. Now we show them what family really means. All of us, together. The discovery came by accident. Luke was reinforcing the cabin's root cellar when his shovel struck something solid. A tin box, sealed against the earth's damp. Inside, protected by oilcloth, lay a letter in Thomas's hand, dated just days before his death. My dearest Sarah, Luke read aloud as they gathered around the kitchen table. If you're reading this, then my suspicions were correct, and my family has shown their true nature. Sarah's hands trembled as she took the letter. I never knew. Read it, Mama, Emma whispered, pressing close. Sarah's voice grew stronger. As she read, they think I don't remember the truth about Elizabeth, my sister, how they drove her to despair with their rigid control, their manipulation of her children, how they used custody threats to break her marriage to the unsuitable man she loved. I was too young then to help her, but I'm not too young now. Luke's arm tightened around her shoulders as she continued. They're already circling Sarah. I see it in Father's eyes when he visits, that same cold calculation that destroyed Elizabeth. They'll try to take our children, claim you're unfit, just as they did to Robert when Elizabeth died. Who's Robert? James asked softly. Elizabeth's husband, Sarah breathed, pieces falling into place. Your father never spoke of him, because the Mitchells erased him, Luke said grimly, like they tried to erase me after Mary. Thomas's words confirmed it. They'll use their money, their influence, to paint you as incompetent, immoral. They did it to Robert, accused him of causing Elizabeth's death, though it was their cruelty that drove her to it. They took his children, erased all trace of his love for them. Those children grew up believing their father abandoned them. Emma clutched Luke's Bible, its pressed flowers suddenly more precious. They won't do that to us. No. Sarah's voice hardened as she read on. Thomas made sure of it. I've gathered proof of their dealings, their manipulations, the forged documents they used against Robert, the bribes paid to judges. It's all here, hidden where they'll never think to look. The letter led them to a loose floorboard beneath Thomas's old desk. Inside lay a packet of papers, evidence collected over years of quiet observation, bank drafts proving bribery, letters revealing their systematic destruction of Elizabeth's marriage, legal documents with forged signatures. Your father was protecting you, Luke said softly. All of you. The truth about Elizabeth. It changes everything. Sarah spread the papers across the table. The courts won't look kindly on their history of manipulation. And look at this. Luke held up a letter from a Boston doctor. Proof they delayed treatment for Elizabeth, just like... He stopped, pain crossing his face. Just like with Mary, Emma finished, touching his hand. They hurt lots of families, didn't they? James studied the documents with his newfound mathematical precision. These dates, the money they paid. It's all evidence, isn't it, like in Pa's detective stories? Better, Luke smiled grimly. It's truth, and truth's the one thing the Mitchells can't buy their way around. Sarah gathered the papers carefully. We'll need help. Legal help. Already thought of that. Luke pulled out a letter of his own. Remember my army buddy I wrote to? He's a judge now in the territorial court. Says he'd be happy to hear our case and look into the Mitchells' pattern of behavior. Emma had begun to draw, her quick strokes capturing the scene. Their family united around the table, Thomas's letter like a beacon between them, truth shining out to light their way forward. Pa protected us, she said, adding Thomas's spirit, watching over them in gentle lines, and now we'll protect each other. Sarah touched the letter, feeling Thomas's love reach across time to shield them still. We'll need to move carefully. The Mitchells are dangerous when cornered. Let them. Come, Luke said quietly. Some battles need fighting, not just for ourselves, but for all the Roberts and Elizabeths they've destroyed. For Mary, for Thomas, for every family they've tried to break. James stood straighter. We're not afraid. No. Sarah smiled at her. Son's courage, so like his father's. We're not, because we have the two things the Mitchells never understood. Truth and love. She looked at her family. Luke's strength, Emma's insight, James's determination, and now Thomas's final gift, giving them the weapons they needed to fight back. Tomorrow, she said, we start planning our defense, but tonight, we remember, Emma finished, adding the last touches to her drawing, and we thank Papa Thomas for watching over us still. Luke lit a lamp, its glow turning the papers to gold. Outside, spring wind carried the scent of their growing crops. There, blooming flowers, life persisting, truth emerging, love winning against all odds. Luke chose sunset for his formal proposal, though they'd already decided everything in quiet moments between chores and children's laughter. He led Sarah to their garden, where the first sprouts were pushing through dark soil toward light. Seemed right to do this here, he said, taking her hands. Where we're growing our future. Emma and James watched from behind the newly flowering apple saplings, trying and failing to be subtle. Their excited whispers carried on the evening breeze. Sarah Mitchell. Luke knelt in the soft earth, still wearing his work clothes. Honest and real as their love, you and these children gave me back my heart when I thought it was buried forever. Will you make our family official? Marry me under God's sky, right here on the land we're building together? Yes, Sarah's voice was sure and strong. 1,000 times yes. Their kiss was interrupted by the children's cheering as they abandoned their hiding place to tackle them both with hugs. Emma already had her sketchbook out, capturing the moment in swift, happy strokes. We should do it soon, Luke said, as they walked back to the cabin. Before the Mitchells' next move, Judge Harrison says marriage will strengthen our position considerably. Tomorrow, Emma declared. We can't wait, Sarah laughed. We need a few days at least to notify the pastor, prepare properly. A week then, James negotiated. The apple trees will still be blooming. Luke's army friend, Judge Harrison, arrived 3 days later to help with preparations. He studied Thomas's evidence with a lawyer's sharp eye and a friend's understanding. This changes everything, he said, spreading the papers across their table. Pattern of behavior, documentary evidence of past manipulation. The territorial court will take a very dim view of their methods. Will marriage help? Sarah asked. Watching Luke teach the children their roles for the ceremony significantly shows stability, permanent commitment, and Luke's military record, his standing in the community. The Mitchells won't find him as easy to discredit as they did Robert. The marriage license arrived next day, carried by Annie Henderson herself. Whole town's talking, she said cheerfully. Most folks are on your side. Even Reverend Simmons says it's a proper Christian example, how you've built this family. Sarah touched the official document, her heart full. More than a legal paper, it was validation of their love, their choices, their future. The morning of their wedding dawned clear and bright. Emma had decorated the garden arch with Mary's favorite. Flowers, grown from Luke's saved seeds. James proudly wore Thomas's repaired pocket watch, keeping perfect time for the ceremony. Something old, something new, Emma recited, helping Sarah with her hair. The old is Papa Thomas's letters and Mary's flowers. The new is our family growing stronger. Guests arrived steadily, neighbors who'd watched their family grow, friends who'd stood by them through gossip and hardship. Judge Harrison came in his official capacity, the marriage license ready, along with adoption papers for the children. Cover all the legal grounds, he said with a wink. Make sure those Boston lawyers can't find any cracks to slip through. Luke waited beneath the flower-draped arch, looking at Sarah like she was sunrise after endless night. The children stood with them as they spoke their vows, their voices adding "we do" to every promise made. What God and love have joined, Reverend Simmons proclaimed, let no man's law put asunder. The adoption papers were signed next, Judge Harrison officiating with proper gravity, though his eyes twinkled at the children's excitement. It's all official now, Emma said, throwing flower petals with enthusiastic abundance. We're really, truly family forever. We always were, sweet girl. Luke scooped her up. Papers just help other folks see it too. The celebration lasted into evening, neighbors contributing food and music. Sarah watched her children dance with their new father, saw how naturally they moved together, how completely love had healed them all. Thomas would be pleased, Annie Henderson said softly, seeing his family so well loved. Yes. Sarah touched her old locket, then her new ring. He helped make this possible. His courage, his foresight, and his love, Luke added, coming to claim a dance, living on in these children, in our family's heart. They swayed together under apple blossoms and spring stars, their joined hands holding all the strength of the law, all the power of truth, all the unstoppable force of love chosen, fought for, and made stronger by every challenge faced together. The territorial courthouse in Cheyenne stood solid as Wyoming's mountains, its wooden benches packed with spectators. The Mitchell lawyers had brought a full team from Boston, their polished appearances a stark contrast to the frontier dignity of Luke and Sarah's supporters. But it was the Mitchell patriarch himself, Theodore Mitchell Sr., who commanded attention. He sat like an emperor in exile, his white hair and patrician features carved from the same marble as his Boston mansion. "Quite a circus they've created," he commented loudly to his lawyers, "all to hide the simple fact that my grandchildren are being kept in squalor by an incompetent mother and her companion." Luke's hand tightened on Sarah's, but his voice stayed gentle as he turned to the children. "Remember what we talked about?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Truth speaks for itself. We just have to let it be heard." Judge Harrison took the bench, his familiar face reassuringly stern. The Mitchell lawyers rose first, presenting their case with practiced eloquence. "These children," their lead counsel declared, "deserve the advantages only Boston society can provide. Their grandfather can offer education, culture, connections." "And what of love?" Judge Harrison interrupted. "Can he offer that?" The lawyer faltered slightly. "The Mitchell family's devotion to these children is beyond question." "Is it?" Sarah's lawyer, a shrewd local woman recommended by Judge Harrison, stood. "The court would like to present evidence regarding the Mitchell family's pattern of behavior in family matters." Theodore Mitchell's face tightened as Thomas's hidden papers were brought forward. The courtroom stirred as the story of Elizabeth emerged, documented proof of manipulation, forged papers, delayed medical care. "This is ancient history," the Mitchell lawyers protested, "irrelevant to the current case." "On the contrary," Judge Harrison's voice cut through their objections. "Pattern of behavior is highly relevant in custody matters." Sarah watched Theodore Mitchell's face as her lawyer detailed Elizabeth's tragedy, Robert's destruction, the grandchildren raised to believe lies. The patriarch's mask cracked slightly, showing something like fear beneath. Then came Luke's testimony about Mary, delivered with quiet power. "They did the same to my wife and daughter. Delayed help, demanded conformity as the price of survival." "Lies," Theodore Mitchell burst out, "from a man who abandoned his military duty." "Decorated for valor," Judge Harrison corrected sharply, "as the court record clearly shows." The Mitchell lawyers rallied, presenting evidence of the homestead's primitive conditions. Sarah's lawyer countered with testimony from neighbors, the pastor, the school teacher. One by one, the community rose to support them. "I've seen those. Children thrive," Reverend Simmons testified, "growing in knowledge, faith, and character under the guidance of two devoted parents. James's mathematics surpasses students 3 years his senior," the teacher added. "And Emma's artistic gifts are extraordinary. They're receiving an education of mind, heart, and spirit." Finally, the children themselves were called to speak. James stood straight and tall, his voice clear. "Grandfather says Boston would give us advantages, but Pa, Luke McCall, he teaches us real things, how to build, how to calculate crop yields, how to face life's hard times with courage." Emma's testimony was simpler, but equally powerful. She brought her drawings, showing the court their family's journey through her artist's eyes. "This is what love looks like," she explained, displaying the garden scene, the wolf pelt, the quilting night. "You can't learn this in Boston." The final blow came when Sarah's lawyer presented proof of bribes attempted against Judge Harrison himself. The Mitchell lawyers' objections were drowned out by the courtroom's angry murmur. Theodore Mitchell stood, his facade cracking completely. "Everything I did was for the family name. These frontier savages can't possibly understand." "Order!" Judge Harrison's gavel crashed down. "Mr. Mitchell, you will be seated or held in contempt." The verdict, when it came, was decisive. Full custody granted to Sarah and Luke McCall. The Mitchell family barred from any interference. Theodore Mitchell and his lawyers recommended for criminal investigation regarding their pattern of legal manipulation. Truth speaks for itself, Emma whispered as the verdict was read, echoing Luke's words. Outside the courthouse, spring sunshine blessed their victory. The community gathered around them, offering congratulations and support. But it was the children's joy that moved Sarah most deeply, their free, uninhibited happiness proof of every choice they'd made. "It's really over," she said wonderingly. Luke gathered them all close. "No, love. It's really beginning." The traveling photographer set up his equipment in their blooming garden, the glass plates catching morning light like captured sunshine. Sarah smoothed Emma's dress one last time, marveling at how much had changed since that stiff Boston portrait. "No need to be formal," Luke said, arranging them beneath the flowering apple trees. "This is about who we really are." Emma had insisted they include symbols of their journey. The wolf pelt draped over the porch rail, Luke's Bible with its pressed flowers on Sarah's lap, Thomas's pocket watch gleaming in James's hand. Even the quilt they'd made together hung. Behind them, a patchwork testimony of love. "Now," the photographer ducked beneath his black cloth, "show me the family you've become." It wasn't hard. They settled naturally together, Luke's arms strong around Sarah's shoulders, the children leaning into them with easy affection. Love had written itself into their postures, their smiles, the way they fit together like pieces of a cherished whole. "I want copies for everyone," Annie Henderson called from where the neighbors had gathered to witness. "Something this special needs sharing." The first picture was formal enough to satisfy propriety, all of them facing forward, properly composed. But the second caught them in natural joy. Emma showing Luke her latest drawing, James explaining his crop calculations to Sarah, their faces bright with shared purpose and delight. "That's the one," Luke said when the photographer showed them. "The plates. That's our truth." The celebration afterward felt like a second wedding. The community gathered in their garden, sharing food and music and stories of the long journey that had brought them here. "Remember when Luke first arrived?" Reverend Simmons mused. "We all thought, well, we thought wrong. God's hand was in this clear as sunrise." James proudly showed off the new barn plans he and Luke had drawn. "Pa says we can expand the herd next spring. I'll have my own cattle to manage. And I'm painting a proper sign," Emma added, "for the ranch entrance. McCall Family Farm, with flowers all around it." Sarah watched her children move confidently among their neighbors, remembering how isolated they'd been just months ago. Now Emma was teaching other children to draw, while James's head for figures had earned him an apprenticeship of sorts with the general store's bookkeeper. "Quite a change from that scared widow I found last winter," Luke said softly, coming up behind her. Sarah leaned into his strength. "We saved each other, I think, all of us." The photographer's assistant was setting up the finished portraits for viewing. The difference between these images and the old Boston portrait struck everyone who saw them. Where the Mitchell photograph had shown rigid poses and empty eyes, these captured something alive and growing, a family built on choice and courage and love's patient healing. "Put that one in the parlor," Emma decided, pointing to the natural scene, where everyone can see what real family looks like. Luke gathered them close, his voice rough with emotion. "Real family. You know, Mary used to say that love's the only true inheritance, more valuable than all the Mitchell money and influence." She was right. Sarah touched the pressed flowers in the Bible. "Look at these children. They're richer in love and character than any Boston fortune could make them." James had been doing calculations again. "Pa, if we reinvest the profits from this year's crops, by next spring we can—" Luke laughed. "Already planning our expansion, son?" "Well, Emma needs a proper art room," James said practically. "And if we get that milk cow you promised—" Their neighbors drifted home. As evening painted the sky in colors, Emma immediately began sketching. The portraits were carefully wrapped to dry, But they didn't need glass plates to show them their truth. It was there in the garden they'd planted. Together, the home they'd rebuilt, the love they'd grown from sorrow's ashes. Tomorrow, Luke said as they watched the sunset, we start our next chapter. All of us together, Emma added sleepily. Sarah looked at her family, really looked, seeing them as the photographer's lens had. Strong, united, blooming like their garden in spring sunshine. The portrait would capture this moment, but their love would keep growing, keep healing, keep building something beautiful from life's broken pieces. Together, she echoed, holding them close as stars began to shine. Always together. 1 year later, Sarah stood in the doorway of their expanded home, watching Luke and James string fence across newly purchased acres. The deed in her hands made it official. The McCall family ranch now stretched from creek to mountain, the largest working farm in the territory. Emma sat at her drawing table by the new bay window, adding color to her latest commission. Word of her talent had spread, and now she created portraits for families across 3 territories. Her latest piece showed their ranch in full summer glory, the blooming gardens, the thriving herds, and most importantly, the family at its heart. Look, Mama, she held up the painting. I added the new baby's cradle on the porch. Sarah touched her growing belly, smiling. Their miracle conceived in love and celebrated by the whole community. Luke had cried when she told him, his strong, hands gentle on her stomach as he whispered thanks to God, to Mary, to Thomas, to all the love that had brought them here. "Pa's going to teach me about breeding horses next spring," James called, riding up for water. His confidence on horseback matched his skill with numbers. The general store now relied on his calculations for their quarterly inventory. "One thing at a time," Luke laughed, following his son. "Let's master this fence first." He kissed Sarah as he passed, still tasting of sunshine and promise. The deed crackled between them, its official language stating what their hearts had known all along. This land, this life, this love belonged to all of them together. "Reverend Simmons is bringing his granddaughter for art lessons," Emma announced, cleaning her brushes. "He says I have a gift for teaching like Pa does." The comparison would once have startled them all. Now it felt natural. Luke and Mary's, gentle wisdom flowing through Emma's artist's hands, just as Thomas's determination lived in James's careful planning. Sarah remembered that desperate winter night when she'd prayed for miracle. God had answered with more than mere survival. He'd sent them Luke, who taught them all that love wasn't a finite resource to be hoarded, but a living thing that grew stronger with each heart it touched. The new deed listed all their names, Luke and Sarah McCall, Emma and James McCall, and space at the bottom for the little one coming in spring. A family chosen, built, and proven stronger than any force that tried to break it. Annie's brought her quilting circle, Emma pointed down the road. They want to start the baby's quilt. Sarah watched the women approach, bearing fabric and friendship in equal measure. She remembered that first quilt they'd made during the blizzard, how love had sewn them together, stitch by stitch. "I'll get fresh coffee," James offered, ever practical. "And Pa, you promised to tell them about the time you delivered twins in that field hospital." "That story again?" Luke's eyes crinkled. "Well, it does prove that nothing's impossible with enough faith and help." Like their family, Sarah thought. Impossible by Boston standards, yet here they stood, thriving, loving, growing. The new deed wasn't just a legal document. It was proof that dreams could take root in rocky soil, that love could bloom in winter's depths, that family was something you built with choice and courage and unwavering heart. Emma had captured it all in her painting. The strong new fences, the flourishing crops, the family working and laughing together. Even Thomas and Mary were there, subtle figures in the sunset light, forever part of their story. "You know what today is?" Luke asked softly as the women settled with their quilting. Sarah nodded. 1 year since the court victory. 1 year of peace, of growth, of watching their children blossom in freedom's fertile soil. "I'd choose it all." "Again," she said, "every moment that brought us here, even the hard ones." especially those. They taught us what we could survive together. James rode out to help the Henderson boys with their cattle. Emma spread her art supplies to teach the girls. Luke and Sarah stood in their doorway, watching love multiply across the land they'd bought with courage and defended with truth. The deed sat on their table beside Luke's Bible, with its pressed flowers, Thomas's letters, and Emma's drawings. Different kinds of proof, legal, spiritual, historical, artistic, all telling the same story. That love was the strongest deed of all, and family the most precious property anyone could own. "Our next chapter's already starting," Luke whispered, touching her belly gently. Sarah leaned into his strength, feeling their miracle move beneath his hand. "And we'll write it together," she said. "All of us, always together."